Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Guns Across the Lakes. My name is Eric Hemenway. I am the Director of Archives and Records for the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians. I am here today at the Mackinac Island Native American Museum at the Biddle House for the Mackinac State Historic Parks, Mackinac Island, Michigan. And in this episode, we will be discussing the repercussions the War of 1812 had on tribal nations in the Great Lakes. Hello, Ani, Buju, Biju and Disnikas, Anamatukamek and Donjuba, Anishinaabe Andau and Jijik Dodim, Jinagay Archives and Records for the Waganuk Singodawak. My native name is The Lynx, my English name is Eric Hemenway, I am Anishinaabe Odawa, and I am from the place of the Prayer Tree, aka Cross Village, Michigan, and I'm of the Crane Clan. I am the Director of Archives and Records for the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians. As a historian, as an Anishinaabe person, a Native person, I have a great interest in the War of 1812. I've studied it, not just because of the heroes that I see in the records and in the stories, such as Tecumseh, such as Jingwa Kuntz, and Makere Penase, and other individuals who, from my perspective, were fighting for our rights to exist on our native lands, to uphold our way of life, but then also the repercussions of this war, what it had on my communities, on my tribe, on my people, on me as a Native person to this very day. And those repercussions are very far-reaching, they're very strong, and it's something that I don't think the public is very aware of, what this war meant after it was over for Native peoples in the Great Lakes. And not just for Native peoples in the Great Lakes, but Native peoples across the United States. Many warriors from my villages of Middle Village, Cross Village, Little Traverse, from here at Mackinac, they departed east and they departed west to fight. They departed to uphold a way of life that had been here since time immemorial, since creation. But after the war, things changed very drastically for the Anishinaabe, the Odawa, the Potawatomi, and the Ojibwe. After the war, we couldn't take up arms to defend our ways. We had to go into different negotiations and different agreements to keep what we had had for thousands of years, land, resources, our families. So the change was very quick, it was very rapid, and it was very severe for the Anishinaabe here in Michigan. Soon after the war, more populations that were not native started to come onto our lands, competing for resources such as land, food, and water. And as these populations came in, they started to enforce their way of life on us. There was forced assimilation. There was this idea that Native people were savages and uncivilized, and it was the duty of the American government and society to bring us into, quote-unquote, a civilized state. That mean our religion would change, our dress, our housing, our government, how we raised our kids, how we hunted, how we fished. Every single thing that made us Anishinaabe was targeted for change. And with this change was the idea of removal. The Native people had to be removed from contact with whites. It was for their best interests. But we all know that wasn't for our best interests, it was for our lands. So this idea of Indian removal took legal form in 1830 with the Indian Removal Act. This is only 15 years after the war was concluded in 1815. So within literally 15 years, there's this legal mechanism that would effectively remove 100,000 Native people from their homes east of the Mississippi to west of the Mississippi. These removal treks were often dubbed Trail of Tears, Trail of Death, because that's just what they were. People would die on the move westward, and when they got out west, they had no resources. They didn't know how to hunt, they didn't know how to grow. So the hardships for many tribes continued on after they were removed. So we were fighting to stay home. We were fighting to keep our way of life. And here in northern Michigan, we avoided removal, but we were targeted for removal in the 1830s. They wanted to remove the Odawa, my community, to Kansas, but we fought against that. And one of the ways that we did fight against that was we got into treaty negotiations. And the treaty that really was a hallmark for this area was the 1836 Treaty of Washington, D.C. And many of the tribal people who fought in the war shifted gears and took up the diplomatic mantle of being treaty negotiators. One such individual that didn't fight in the war for us, but it was very influential, was this individual here, Augustine Hamlin. And I strongly feel that if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here on Mackinac Island today giving this presentation. I would be in Kansas. He was an interpreter for our communities during the 1836 treaty because We needed that individual to honestly interpret what was being said. And without him, we would have been removed, I feel. But we were lucky because we had an Augustine. Some tribes didn't, and they did get removed. Ohio, Indiana, Illinois was vacated of their native populations. An individual by the name of Black Hawk, he fought in the War of 1812 alongside my ancestors who were Odawa and Ojibwe and Potawatomi. His story is one of tragedy and sorrow, where he was finally removed, but after his own conflict called Black Hawk's War, where the entire tribe was almost extinguished. So here I stand today in the land of my ancestors, but it's because of my ancestors I am able to stand here today. The War of 1812 had drastic and long-lasting repercussions for tribes that are still felt to this day. Forced assimilation, Indian boarding schools, reservations, loss of land, language, culture, traditions are all part of that legacy of the War of 1812. Tribes are rebounding, they're regaining, they're reclaiming. Here on Mackinac Island, we have a new installation as part of the Mackinac State Historic Parks, the Biddle House. It's a Native American Interpretive Center, telling more story from a Native perspective. Join us next week for the final installation of Guns Across the Lake at Perry's Victory and International Peace Memorial, where you'll learn about the conclusion of the war and its repercussions for the United States, Canada, and tribal nations.